I'm Riley,
And I'm Ronnie,
and this is the Plan to Eat podcast.
where we have conversations about meal planning, food, and wellness to help you answer the question, what's for dinner?
Hello, and welcome to the Plan to Eat podcast. Today, we got to talk to Lisa Dahl of Lisa Dahl Wellness. She's a health and wellness coach specializing in intuitive eating, mindful eating, and body image. She's a former caterer and now an expert meal planner. She uses a tool called menu mapping and mindful meal planning, which is based in flexibility, balance, variety, pleasure, and simplicity.
Today, we got to talk to Lisa all about how she works with her clients to move them from a yo-yo dieting lifestyle into a more intuitive eating lifestyle. So she helps people who struggle with body issues, maybe have a love-hate relationship with food, and helps them shift their maybe disordered eating patterns into this intuitive eating style. We also talk about her menu mapping process and how she uses that to help her clients create meal plans that will help them love the food that they eat. And we hope that you enjoy this episode. Well, Lisa, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast today. We appreciate you being here.
I'm so excited to be here. I have been following you and part of Plan to Eat for probably 3 years. And so I'm just super excited to talk to you and continue to get to go to know both of you better. So this is a great opportunity.
Oh, we're excited too. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you and your business?
Awesome. So I am Lisa Dahl. I'm a health and wellness coach, and I focus on the practice of intuitive, mindful eating and body image. And what that all really means is that I take a non-diet approach to health and wellness. So we take the number on the scale off of our metrics of success, and we focus on hopes, dreams, clarity, other ways that you will feel better in your body, about your life, mentally, emotionally, physically, because we are full bodies and far more greater than that number on the scale.
Oh, that's wonderful. Did you come to this through your own dieting issues?
What a kind way to say that. So absolutely, yes. So my dieting history or being uncomfortable in my body started when I was in elementary school. And I remember in 3rd grade, I had this really nice gym teacher, Mr. Lazarus. And he pulled me aside and he said, you need to go to special gym so that you can learn to walk on the balance beam. And that just set me up well. It was meant with the best of intentions. It put me last, to be picked last in any, class dividing of teams and sports, not wanting to participate in athletics, trying harder than I was before to get out of gym class. I'm sure it had the direct opposite of what his intentions were. And then it was further compounded when I was in high school and we were in 9th grade and we were told the week before that we were going to be weighed and measured in school. And then I'm thinking, okay, if I start starting now, what will that number be? And thinking about, okay, I can skip breakfast and then standing in line and sweating and then worrying about, are they going to say that number out loud and looking at a sea of bodies that appeared to be in a smaller body than mine, or a better body than mine. So I really started dieting when I was, 13, 14 years old. I was a lifetime member of Weight Watchers, lived and died by points, numbers on the scale, took that scale everywhere I went. And I proceeded to have a very long, sordid diet history for 40 plus years. And I could diet really well. So I knew a ton about nutrition. I knew how to restrict. I was known for that person who had so much willpower, a lot of judgment about what I ate, what other people ate. And when I shifted careers from catering, because when you have this major, love-hate relationship with food, you surround yourself with food in a very disordered way. I moved into health and wellness coaching because I thought, all my experience, I can meal plan. I know all this nutrition. I know how to diet better than most. I'm going to be the best weight loss coach out there. And when I started working with my clients, I started to really feel uncomfortable and feel their stress and anxiety on the days that were quote unquote share your progress days, which meant tell me where you are on the scale. And they would be making such amazing progress with their sleep and their energy and their food choices. And sometimes, a lot of times, it doesn't get reflected on the number on the scale. And it made me start to look at my behavior, which was not healthy, which I didn't know because it's so normalized to have unhealthy, disordered eating patterns. You don't even know that it's disordered eating patterns. And, when I'm in my sweet spot, I would weigh myself multiple times a day to make sure that I didn't gain an ounce between breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And if it creeped, then I wouldn't go on the scale for days and starve myself. So because of, feeling their stress and anxiety and going, like, this is not, how do you coach that? Because it's terrible. And I discovered a book called Health at Every Size, which was written by Linda Bacon. And it literally changed my life personally and professionally. Everything that I thought to be true about thinner bodies, being healthier, better, happier, was simply not true. And so much misinformation about health and wellness. And from there, I discovered the practice of intuitive eating, which is the anti-diet way of really making peace with your food and your body. And it shifted my entire perspective. And that is, kind of the very condensed version of how I became a non-diet health coach.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. And it's so interesting to me how things that are, said to us when we're children impact us for the rest of our lives, for a whole life. I can remember when I was about 7 or 8 and somebody really close to me told me that I was getting a muffin top, and it brought me so much shame. And I think it was definitely something that propelled me into, yeah, like a diet lifestyle for a really long time. And I tried to, like do a bikini competition when I was in my early 20s and all sorts of stuff. And it's like, it was all fueled, by this one comment that just, I feel like will forever be stuck in my brain.
Absolutely. Like when I work with my clients, you know, a lot of people like have that guilt and the shame, like, what have I done? Like, why am I this way? And it's really flipping that story as to, who helped pack those bags? Because we are born loving our bodies. We're born intuitive eaters. We are born knowing when we're hungry, when we're full. When you feed a baby, they will, cry when they're hungry, which is really a later sign that they're hungry. And they'll turn their heads away when they're full. And then as parents, we want to be the best parent or caregiver, and we offer the breast again. We offer the bottle again. Are you hungry? We play games trying to get them to open their mouths, and we start to build distrust in these little tiny babies that know so much more than we do. And then it gets compounded as we get older and people start to have a comment or, look at how much you've grown, to, oh, look at how much you've grown. Just the inflection and a change of voice and tone starts to shift your thoughts about your body. If the only thing, whoever is listening to this podcast, if the only thing that you take away from this is to never comment on somebody else's body. You have no idea if they are struggling with an eating disorder or disordered eating patterns, if they are experiencing loss, if they have been diagnosed with an illness or don't even know. If somebody seems unhappy, talk about, you look sad and your eyes look sad, or you look stressed. Tell me what's going on. Leave their body out of it because you have no idea what you are saying with the best of intention. Even when, you look great. But what that says is, well, they didn't look great before. So it's so nuanced and double-edged that it's something that I just have such a strong affinity to, of really working with people to, keep those comments to themselves. Don't even comment on your own body because that sets yourself up against pitting it against somebody else. How do we work through those challenges? And it's hard because we're so, trained to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you help your clients? I just feel like that's such an inundated thing. It's in our minds, it's in our culture. These things that we're talking about, struggling with comments and all, like the way we feel about the scale, all of that. How do you help take your clients and shift their mindset? Because that's a pretty hard fought battle, I think.
It is a very hard fought battle. So, first of all, when I work with my clients, It's not about fixing them. It's about helping them learn how to shift and change their perspective. So think about if you're climbing a ladder, you have to go one rung at a time. So when we're talking about shifting our mindset, it's also talking about statements that we can actually believe. So when somebody says, I hate my body, or I hate being fat, or nobody could ever love me if I'm fat, how do we find a statement that you can start to accept? Is it really true that anybody who's in a larger body cannot be loved? So perhaps that statement is, someday I will believe that people in larger bodies can be loved. Or I notice people in larger bodies holding hands with somebody and they look like they're in a relationship or some sort of partnership. Finding things that your brain can accept, because you can't go from I hate my body to I love my body. That's
Mm.
not reality. Understanding where you got these stories from. So I have one client who is now in her early 50s, and all through her childhood, her father would literally look her up and down and pass judgment on how she looked and commented on her body. And we were talking, and he lives out of town, so she doesn't see him that often, but the stress and the anxiety that ensues, like, with these visits, and it's learning to set boundaries over, you are no longer allowed to say anything about my body. And that takes confidence too, to be able to get that verbiage out. So it's not a simplistic task. And then she struggles with, when she sees him, is he not saying anything because I don't look good, or is he actually accepting my boundaries?
Mm.
So it takes a lot of time to unpack, relearn, set boundaries, and gain confidence in separating your value and your self-worth from the size of your body. Because our weight is the least interesting thing about all of us. How do we start to shift those thoughts and practice learning new associations? So food is just the messenger. We're really talking about so many other different things that go on to that dieting mentality.
So, along with trying to help people shift their mindsets, are you also helping them specifically with food? I mean, you said you do meal planning and things like that. So, are you also providing that for your clients as a way to create healthier relationships with the food they're eating?
So there's a couple of things that I do. One is, the practice of intuitive eating is based on principles. So I help my clients understand the principles of intuitive eating, which are understanding or rejecting diet culture. Where did all this messaging come from? Learning how to connect your mind, your body, your heart, and your food. So understanding when you feel your hunger, understanding your fullness, understanding how to cope with your emotions with kindness. We all think emotional eating is this horrible thing. If we shift our perspective that emotional eating is actually a gift, it's telling you that you have some unmet need, and you're using that food to soothe that pain that you were experiencing. Imagine if you didn't have that tool when you were going through a really like, think about the pandemic. I mean, how many people needed to eat to get through the pandemic, to get through those long days? If they didn't have that, what other tool, what would they have done? The amount of stress and anxiety would have even been that much worse. I work with my clients to help them find other tools in their toolbox in addition to food, because sometimes food is what we need. Understanding what satisfaction looks like, and its environment, our relationships, our financial stress, our emotional stress, all of those things come into how to create satisfaction. Every meal, it's impossible to have every meal be satisfying. When you know what creates the ultimate satisfaction, you can start to create and make changes to become more satisfied. I help my clients understand to move and bring in exercise because it feels good, not about shrinking their bodies. And nutrition comes last. So when I talk about meal planning, I don't tell my clients what to eat. I help my clients figure out what foods make them feel best, and help them to develop tools to make meal planning more easily accessible in their day-to-day lives. And that looks different for everybody.
So you used a tool, which I know you haven't mentioned yet, called menu mapping and mindful meal planning. Would you talk to us a little bit about menu mapping first? Because
Sure.
I think it's going to be really helpful for people as they think through how they meal plan, and it could help people who might want to work with you, but also people who just meal plan.
Yep. So when I talk about menu mapping, I think about a core food and where it's going to be used, because everything that I try to do can be multi-purposed or reused or repurposed. So let's just start with a basic roast chicken. And this one's really fresh because it's something I did this week because it's just such a great base. So you have a roast chicken, and in my roast chicken, I also put in, onions and carrots and either sweet potatoes, things to make it a complete meal. So that meal is just one pot, easy. There's only two of us, so there's always extras. So I always think about, how can I repurpose this chicken? So that chicken got put into, I make a lentil salad, and the lentil salad could be vegetarian, or I can add chicken so I could pump it up a little bit more and can go a little bit further. Or I added it to, I make a quinoa stuffed eggplant, and we added some chicken in there so that we had some extra protein. If you have kids, you can turn the chicken into some quesadillas. I take that carcass, I put it into the freezer because I know I'm going to make chicken soup. Everything is always reused, repurposed. We have a 2-year-old dog. The little scrapings that come off that chicken, because she is a very well indulged dog, she always gets something yummy in her dog bowl. So chicken is part of her regular diet. So we will always take, nothing goes to waste. And we take chicken and we put it right into her bowl, goes into containers, and it goes into the freezer so that I don't have to make an extra meal for her. So that's just a simple, one example of many. Um, Another example could be shrimp. Like one night, like my son was home and we were going to make this big shrimp dinner. And then we all kind of were like, we're just not in the mood. So instead of turning the shrimp into like a pan-seared shrimp with orange sauce, avocado, and this whole thing, like, oh, we can just turn it into shrimp cocktail. From that shrimp cocktail the next day, I was able to take the leftover shrimp and turn it into shrimp salad. So I kind of think about, here's my core, like my center, and then there's little spokes all coming off. If you think about an infographic on where the different places that food can go. And you can be very ingredient focused as well.
Mhm.
Like if you know that you're cooking several different meals, where can you use red onion and only chop it once and put it into, a container for tomorrow and the next day, or something such as quinoa or farro that can be used today and then frozen into different sizes. Like if you know that you always need a half a cup for this size, I will put it away into my freezer so that I don't have to make farro 3 times a week. So I'm always thinking about how to map it out, how to go into the future of how to repurpose and reuse.
It feels like a game, but a really like a more interesting, I think it's easy to get locked in with something, even as simple as chicken, of like, okay, we're gonna have this, then we'll have it as leftovers. And then everybody's tired of chicken. But all the recipes you're suggesting with this, they're very diverse. And so even if you're eating, like, just continue with your chicken example. Even if you're eating chicken, you're making it really interesting to keep it mixed up, and then no one's getting bored of it. We're not, going to get takeout instead because we're tired of chicken. It's really keeping things interesting in a way that's pretty beneficial. I need to do that better at my house.
So and it goes to, because how many times do people say like, oh, or their partner or their son or somebody will say, well, I don't like leftovers. Well, that's all great. And you're not doing the cooking 7 days a week.
True.
So how do you be more efficient? I love to cook. I don't want to cook 7 days a week. There's so many other things that I'm interested in doing that I really work hard at trying to figure out how to reuse, how to repurpose. You know, I'm always thinking, can something be frozen? And I prefer a plant-based diet, but my partner's a meat kind of guy. So, I definitely have flexibility. I can prefer one thing and still have room and space for others. So it's not I don't eat or won't eat. So another example is like turkey meatloaf, something basic, all American. You can make that recipe and you can just slice it and put it in the freezer. And I know that he will eat it on another night where I'm probably really not in the mood for it, or it can be used as lunch. I try my best to not do one and done, is really what it comes down to. And there's a way to be able to do it. And it's very different than that mindset, diet mindset of meal planning, where you're very strict on this is what I'm having for breakfast, this is what I'm having for lunch, this is what I'm having for dinner. And then if something doesn't go according to plan, then you're all, crazed and stressed. Mindful meal planning really brings in, flexibility. What is your schedule looking like? Balance, keeping it simple. Here's your list of macronutrients. You've got your proteins, you have your vegetables, you have your starches. You can keep it super simple, kind of like pick one from column A, pick one from column B. If you don't like to cook, just think about how you can mix and match those. And even with that, when you're talking adding in variety. So let's say that you're a parent or caregiver and you've got 3 kids and a husband or spouse or partner who likes a different flavor palette. One of the tricks that I have done over the years is like, I love these combination of spices. He likes these combination of spices. And I've created my own little spice kit so that when I go to X recipe, I'm not putting together 5 things here, 5 things here, because then all of a sudden it takes a half an hour to make roasted broccoli and you want to jump. And, the little ones just want a little bit of salt and pepper, a little bit of salt. You don't even want to put pepper on it. It might be too much flavor. So, and on that same sheet pan, you have 3 different flavor palettes based on what everybody likes with very ease and simplicity. And that goes into helping people discover, what tastes good, because just because it tastes good to me doesn't mean it tastes good to you. How many times have people said, oh, you're going to love it. Really? I really don't love it. How can we not cook 10 different things, but still have a main chunk of it like the same with a little bit of variety so that everybody becomes satisfied and has some pleasure? And also focusing on simplicity. How many times do we can go to the market and you can buy chopped vegetables and chopped fruit? Where is, when you think about meal planning, where does the stress start? Is it, I don't want to cut all this stuff up. Well, if you don't want to cut the stuff up and you still would like to nourish your body with these things, here's some ways that you can get it in, finding your path of least resistance.
Oh, I want to come back to that for sure, the path of least resistance. But that certainly ties into what I've been thinking is that all of this blends so beautifully with the way you help people navigate their history and dieting. And I don't even want to use that word now, but intuitive eating, because this feels like intuitive meal planning. And oftentimes when you're making shifts in the way that you eat, the hardest part of it, or the part that gets you derailed from goals or whatever, is the cooking part and the meal planning part. And the way you're mapping this out, it really removes a lot of that stress. You could potentially only cook once or twice a week, and you're doing a lot of that work for yourself without really working that hard. And I feel like when you lower that stress, it helps everything else flourish.
Absolutely. And it's knowing, it starts with knowing where that resistance is.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes the resistance even starts earlier than that. And it could be that you don't have the right tools to be able to get to that experience. So like I've, occasionally will teach cooking classes, or it's really meal planning classes. I'm not teaching cooking per se, but having, sharing the right tools, like just a simple knife. Is your knife sharp? The biggest way to be frustrated, or in my opinion, one of the biggest ways to be frustrated with meal planning is having a knife that's dull. Because all of a sudden, what could be swift and beautiful and easy is the equivalent of taking a hacksaw and cutting through a piece of wood when you could just make one slice and all of a sudden you're trying to saw through this thing and rocking it back and forth. And a task that should take a second now takes 30 seconds and you don't want to do it anymore. It's not fun.
The one thing that I'm thinking about with this is that I'm envisioning somebody who maybe doesn't have a wealth of recipe knowledge, like, stored in their brain. Like, they can't just say, "Oh, I have shrimp. Here's 3 different recipes I know how to make with shrimp." How do you help people navigate that part of it of like, "Okay, so I have a roasted chicken, but what else do I do with it?"
So that's where we really talk about and unpack. And sometimes people don't even know what they like, especially if they have come from a diet mentality. I remember when I was high in my diet world and somebody says, "Well, what are you in the mood for?" And I'm like, "What do you mean what I'm in the mood for? Like, this is what I have to eat." Like, there is no deviation. Helping people being willing to explore and experiment and really kind of be their own scientist on exploring flavors and talking about, what type of flavors do you like? Do you like things that are sweet, spicy? Helping them understand texture, really bringing in mindful eating so that they can start to connect with what foods, how do they taste? How do they feel? Why do you like certain foods? Where did you learn to eat these foods? Without judgment and just based on curiosity, helping them, think about it as a child. How do we start at step one and discover and expand that palate? A lot of people, will grow up thinking, well, they don't like something because they've never been exposed to it. Or, my mom will be like, I grew up, we don't eat feta cheese. We don't eat beans. And, 30 years later, I'm like, well, why don't I eat beans or feta? And I'm going, because my mother, all of a sudden, like, oh, wait a second, this is ridiculous. I can go taste it and see if I like it for myself. So it's just learning to be willing to, go into the produce, try the produce aisle. Is there something that you haven't tried yet? Are you willing? So it really starts with the very simplicity of helping people to be willing within their scope of willing. What they're willing to eat today might be very different than what they're willing to eat in 6 months from now. So my main intention is to meet them where they are at. I don't ever tell anybody what to eat, when to eat, how much to eat. I help them discover what is best for them. And we really start where they are in that moment in time.
That piece of I didn't grow up eating this, or somebody told me that they didn't like it as a child, and that's a really big thing for me. Sometimes my husband and I grew up on different parts of the U.S. and eating's different in different parts of the U.S. And there are things that he grew up eating that I did not grow up eating. And so as we have been married for a while, I'm trying things. I'm like, I actually do like this. Why did I think I didn't? So we have a daughter, and it's fun with her because I have to really stop myself. She wanted to try something the other day, and in my mind, I'm like, "Oh, you're not gonna like it. Please, just don't waste it." Like, and I stopped myself and I said, "Sure, if that's what you want to do, try it." Like, I tried not to stop her from that, to help remove that thing that I have of like, "Oh, I don't like that."
It's
But
and it's
I just don't know. I've never tried it, or I've never had it that way, or whatever.
And especially and that's a great example. And when you also come from that diet mentality of I don't eat this, and that's something that I struggle with. I still, have it pop up every once in a while because I come from, well, I didn't eat these things for years and convincing myself, well, I don't like it. I don't miss it. I don't need it. And every once in a while, like we'll be out and, and we share a lot of food. And he'll be like, really? Like, do you really not like that? Or where is that coming from? So my partner is very in tune to like my diet craziness that can pop in still every once in a while. And it's learning to give yourself permission to change. And that's hard. Your brain wants to keep you like safe and stuck. How do you be willing to kind of question, well, where did I get that information from? I grew up, you don't eat pork. Well, it's actually very tasty. And I can still have that conversation of like, he loves pulled pork. It's not a meal that I'm yet comfortable going out and ordering, but I will all of a sudden take forkfuls off of his plate. So it's a process.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to just kind of be your own experiment and to allow yourself to shift and change.
I'm curious if you are okay with sharing this. If you feel like there is one area of resistance that is the most common with your clients.
I would say the the biggest thing that is really hard is that people believe that the dieting keeps them safe.
Mm,
Because I will often hear, well, if I go off of my diet, I'm going to be out of control. The false belief is that the diet is what keeps you safe. Because the truth is that when you learn to be able to listen, trust, and respect yourself, that you can be the expert on you, you no longer need the rigidity because you get stuck. Because when you're in that rigidity, once you go off of it, you feel out of control because you don't know how to trust yourself or listen to your intuition or experiment. You've gone on a pendulum from being all the way here of restrict, deprive, rules to being let go into the playground, and it's scary and unsafe. When you can start to understand your relationship and that diet is the thing that keeps you stuck and out of control, that's when you can start to be able to connect your mind, your body, your food, and your heart.
mm. It makes me think too, in my own personal experience, that idea of safety, there's an element of, quitting dieting that alienates you from other people, like from other women a little bit. Like if women is who you're associating with, right? Because everybody, quote unquote, everybody is on a diet. And it's almost like you're now the odd one out by not also being on a diet. And there's a lack of safety in that fact of being the odd one out.
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. That is a conversation that I have with my clients a lot. And we all kind of have that like superiority feeling of like, oh, I'm on this new great diet and I'm going to do all these things and I'm the expert. And everybody's like listening
Hmm.
and judging themselves on, oh, like I'm on this diet. Maybe I need to flip to that diet. And now all of a sudden, when somebody says, well, I'm not dieting, then people think, well, she's giving up on her body and she's going to let herself go. And, we bond over body bashing.
Mm,
How horrible is that? When we decide that that's no longer okay and that's not serving me in a positive mindset, it's a hard shift. And how do you show up for that? Is it disengage from the conversation? Do you shift from the conversation? Because when people are practicing intuitive eating, it's not their responsibility to go out and tell everybody, oh, you have to do this. Because intuitive eating is about autonomy and self-discovery. And it's definitely it's a hard topic to try to figure out how to go from the diet queen to the anti-diet and to not feel that you're letting yourself go. And I wish I had a black and white answer. Fortunately, I don't work in black and white thoughts any longer. So everything is kind of in the gray. It's not you just have to do this because that doesn't work. It's finding your own way, finding your own boundaries, trying to find people that have commonalities with you, thinking about social media. What is your social media feed looking like? Are you looking at the before and after pictures where everybody's, jumping up and down on the bandwagon on how amazing X person looks? Well, I would be willing to bet money within 1 to 5 years that person, that after picture their before picture is going to be their after picture.
mm,
When you shift out of that, we curated our social to reflect our interests. You can curate your social to start to see all different types of bodies, body positivity, people who are focusing on mindful eating, non-diet approach, all different bodies of shapes and sizes. When you see people that look like you don't also feel that negative pull that you are the quote unquote only one in a larger body, because that is simply not true.
mhm.
So it's We bond over body bashing. How do we find a bond that's more nurturing and kind to ourselves versus, looking at our tummies and pinching the inches that are there and saying, well, look at this. I can't believe it. We age, our bodies change. It's normal. It's part of living. And as long as you are breathing, there is more right with your body than wrong. How do we shift our mindsets?
Yeah, the thing I keep thinking is how loud the inner voice, the inner critic can be. And so you had to really have to shift that. But who you're surrounding yourself with helps with that. Like what feels better when someone tells you something encouraging and kind about you, or when, they're like bashing something, not
Right.
not necessarily about you, but like bashing something about themselves. That leads to other people who are hearing that person put that in their mind and it kind of like becomes their own inner voice. It's like, well, that person said this, and then you think that. So maybe potentially, I mean, I love what you said about curating your social feed, but curating the way you interact with your friends and what you intake, and what you allow to kind of like dwell in your mind is really, really important in this intuitive eating and just totally shifting gears on the way you view yourself and other
It's
people too.
Yeah, it's setting boundaries. And
Mm.
when we get into when we get into that comparison, we're talking a lot about self-esteem. So if you're sitting at a table with women and you are the smallest person at that table, your self-esteem is way up high. You kind of feel like you are above the fold. If you are sitting at the table and you are in the largest body, your self-esteem is often on the floor. How do we shift from self-esteem to self-compassion?
Mm.
How do we, and that is where, self-compassion, people say, well, self-compassion is weak. Self-compassion is one of the strongest, one of the most valuable resources that we have, because it allows us to understand that we are not alone, that we can have kindness towards ourselves and others, that it's not a weakness. So really focusing on noticing, like I'll have my clients will say, oh, like what did you, what did you achieve? Or what did you notice this week? Or what was your goal? And they're like, well, I didn't really do much except that I really noticed, I really became aware of. That's where the gold is. When you can be aware of your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, that's when you start to have the capacity to be able to respond versus react. And
Mm.
it's learning to take a pause. How do you, okay, here's that mantra that automatically marches in. Well, wait a second. That's not serving me. Here's three other thoughts that we came up with last week that I can start to say to myself. And the more that you shift that language, the greater that shift is going to be over time. Um, the bottom line is that there's there is no best way for anybody to be other than understanding their own selves. And intuitive eating is about instinct, rational thought, and emotion. And when you can start to combine those things and understand that you can be the expert on yourself and that you don't need some diet guru who is telling the world how to eat. Nobody knows better than you what your emotional state is, what your physical state is, what's happening inside of you. When you understand that there is no pause, it's only doing the best that you can do at that moment in time, that's when you have your power and
Mm.
you get to choose how you want to show up for yourself.
That's beautiful. Well, Lisa, why don't you tell everybody where they can find you online if they are interested in working with you, where they can do that, and then anything else that you want to share with our audience?
Awesome. So you can find me on my website at Lisa Dahl, Dahl, lisadahlwellness.com. And you can find me on Instagram, Facebook. I'm always welcome to an email. I offer free office hours twice a week and they vary. So you can find those on my website. It's a great space to come in, ask questions. There's no agenda, just simply a Zoom link. And you can also go to my website to learn more about my one-on-one coaching. And my coaching is all about meeting you where you are in your health and wellness and We focus on what's going to make you feel best, create your vision, your dream, one step at a time. And I offer online workshops. And again, just go to my website so you can see what's being offered depending on the time of the year.
Cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we like to end all of our episodes by asking our guests if there's a recipe or meal they had recently that was just killer. So what about you?
I made, they were salmon carpaccio towers. And it was so you take tomatoes, like whole tomatoes, you cut them in half and you put them in the oven with oil and garlic, like sitting in it so that it simmers. And then you take the skins off and you save the oil, and you can use the oil, the garlic oil, garlic herb oil in the rest of the recipe. And you take the skins off. And so here's another example of menu mapping or repurposing. So the recipe says, discard the skins. I'm like, oh, wait a second. These skins have like all this amazing flavor. So we ended up taking the skins and the garlic that was roasted in the oil and put that on crackers. Then the rest of the tomato we diced up to put as the base of the recipe, and then it was with avocado, some microgreens, slivers of salmon. But the oil went into all the different parts of the recipe, so it was super, super tasty. So
Yum.
it was delicious, and it was pretty too. So it was really cool.
That sounds great.
That sounds, yeah, really great.
Lisa, thanks so much for joining us today. This has been a great conversation, and we really appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you. And I just have to say how much I love Plan to Eat, that I wish I had used it as a tool when I was catering, because it would have saved me so many hours and hours and hours of expanding recipes and planning. And it is my favorite app that I recommend to all of my clients.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Plan to Eat podcast. We love hearing different approaches to food, and we hope that you enjoy hearing it too.
We would love to invite you to find all the recipes mentioned on the Plan to Eat podcast in our podcast account on Plan to Eat. You can go to plantea.com/PTE pod. That's PTEPOD. And the variety of recipes that you've heard about and the variety of eating types that we talk about, those can all be found in that account.
Thanks again for listening.